first of tonight's reconstructions is a case that made the headlines. The disappearance of those two walkers, Peter and Gwenda Dixon, on a cliff-top path in Pembrokeshire. It happened at the end of June, a time when thousands of tourists were in southwest Wales. Many of those holidaymakers have since returned to the area to help police with the inquiry. Now, some of them have helped to make a Crimewatch reconstruction. It begins at a campsite where the couple had been staying.
Hello, Harrelson Farm.
Hello, is that Miss Davis?
Yes.
It's Tim Dixon here. I'm concerned about my parents. They were due back this weekend, and in fact they were due back at work today, but they haven't turned up yet. Are they still at the campsite?
Well, the tent's still here, and your father's car, but I haven't seen them for a few days.
Something's not right here. They wouldn't just leave the car in the tent. I think you'd better ring the police. Could you contact me after you've done that?
By now, it was 4 days since Peter and Gwenda Dixon had been seen here at Harrelson Farm campsite. The Dixons' holiday had begun 2 weeks earlier, on Monday, June the 19th, when they arrived here from their home in Oxfordshire.
£24.50. It's even cheaper than last year.
Well, you are earlier this year, and we are cheaper in June. Thank you.
We'll probably stay a second week if the weather holds. It was so good this year, we decided to come away before it changed.
Well, if you decide to stay, you can settle before you leave. I hope it stays fine for you.
They'd been visiting this site for 16 years, and so they knew the area well. Both Peter and Gwenda Dixon were very fit. They enjoyed walking and loved the Pembrokeshire countryside. They'd been happily married for 27 years and had 2 children. One of them, their son Tim, joined them on holiday for a couple of days.
And a jumper and a life jacket when you want it.
CQ, 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 Golf Whiskey Zero, Hotel Foxtrot, Quebec Mobile, Golf Whiskey
Peter
Zero,
was a keen
Hotel
radio ham
Foxtrot,
and often
Quebec
spent hours on end contacting other enthusiasts. If you heard his call sign or if you spoke to him by radio at the end of June, please call us now.
Foxtrot, Quebec Mobile, Golf Whiskey Zero, Hotel Foxtrot, Quebec Mobile. Does anybody read?
The village of Marlows is about 5 miles from the campsite. It's the day before the Dixons' disappearance. At about 9 a.m, 2 men were noticed walking away from the post office. Later, the same witness saw the same 2 men about 2 miles from the campsite at St Bride's Crossroads. Do you know who they were? The Dixons were also in Marlows that morning. They asked a farmer if they could drive across his land towards Dale Airfield.
Oh, yes, this is for the radio telephone, and these 2 are for my radio receivers. You get quite good range from high spots, like the airfield.
Oh, yes. Is that why you're going up there now?
No, as a matter of fact, I'm going to see a friend I contacted on the radio. Turns out he's holidaying in the area, too. Thanks.
Dale Airfield is abandoned, an old wartime base perched above the sea, but popular with tourists because of its cliff-top views. Did you see the Dixons here that morning? Did you meet them? Or did you hear Peter Dixon transmitting on his radio? Next day, the day they disappeared, breakfast time on Thursday, June the 29th. And though it's a fine morning, the weather had worsened, and the previous night it had rained heavily. About a quarter of a mile from the campsite at Hasgard, Susan Beddoes was taking her children to school. 2 cyclists caught her attention.
Shall we go Tolbenny way or the Havens? Tolbenny.
It seemed they were heading towards the coastal path via the village of Tolbenny. Dispirited by the erratic weather, Richard Lynes, who was camped next to the Dixons, was packing up to leave.
Morning. How are you this morning? Oh, a bit fed up with this weather. We've decided to go home today.
Yes, we've had enough too.
What time are you off then? About midday. We're going for a walk along the coastal path first, towards Dale. Give the tent time to dry out. Oh, must be off.
Richard Lynes was the last known person to have a conversation with the Dixons. Campers remember seeing the couple set off for their walk at about 9:30. From here, there are no known witnesses. But if the Dixons did take the coastal path towards Dale, this is the way they would have come. Just before 11, Richard Lynes and his wife left the site. They were the only people that knew the Dixons were planning to return home that day, so no one was alarmed when the couple failed to return. Shots were heard at about 11 o'clock, but in a farming area like this, gunshots are not unusual. In Pembroke, at 1:30 that afternoon, someone used Peter Dixon's cash card at the NatWest Bank in Main Street. Whoever it was knew the correct PIN number, but was not familiar with a cash dispenser. He asked for £37, a sum not recognised by the machine. Almost immediately, he corrected his mistake and withdrew £10. Meanwhile, at 2 that afternoon, a family was walking along the coastal path close to Tolbenny Church. They remembered the man because his behaviour was so peculiar. 4 p.m. back in Pembroke, and the cyclist was using Peter Dixon's card again. This time he withdrew £100. A few doors down from the bank is the John Bull store. Someone spent £40 here on a new pair of walking shoes. It's 3 o'clock the next day, Friday the 30th of June, in King Street, Carmarthen. A different man was seen in the vicinity at about the time that Peter Dixon's cash card was used again. There was a blue Ford Sierra parked close by. And 1 day later, on Saturday the 1st of July, Nicholas Elliott was driving through Haverfordwest on his way to work when, at 7:15 a.m, he passed the NatWest Bank in the High Street. From this sighting, police made this artist's impression. Police believe that same cyclist was still in Haverfordwest some 4 hours later in the Whole Food restaurant in Key Street. For 2 days, the RAF, police, coastguards and National Park wardens searched along the coastal footpath, suspecting that the Dixons had fallen from a cliff. What they found was worse than they had feared. Just after 3 p.m. on Wednesday the 5th of July, a police dog discovered their bodies at the edge of the cliff top, carefully hidden by branches. Gwenda and Peter Dixon had been killed with a 12-bore shotgun. Clive Jones, whoever was using the cash card is obviously critical to this case. Crimewatch has been able to enhance the original artist's impression. What do we know about this man?
Well, there is no doubt at all that he is the person that we need to identify and is the person who cashed Mr. Dixon's cash card. I feel that one of the persons who can help us with this and can certainly help us identify him is the fair-haired youth from Marlos, who was in his company the morning before the murders, which we saw in the reconstruction earlier. He's obviously on a hiking holiday in the area, walking, and split up from the cyclist shortly after going through Marlois. I appeal to him, if he is watching, please ring us.
Now, there were a lot of holiday makers in the area at that time. I think you've worked out about 1,200 so far. Presumably the ones you need to talk to most critically are those who were on the cliff-top path on that 29th of June.
Yes, indeed, and we're aware that there were 76 persons who walked that wooded area of the coastal path between the morning and early afternoon. We've traced 40 of these, so there are still 36 people we need to speak to who went through the area. Particularly, there are 2 males who came over a stile at Burrowhead at about 10 a.m. One is aged about 50, the other 30. They were casually dressed and they walked into the wooded area and should have seen or met up with Mr. and Mrs. Dixon.
Okay, but if anyone was in the area around this time at the very end of June, you need to hear from them.
Yes, absolutely.
What about the campsite? I mean, at Halston, I know Miss Davis didn't keep names and addresses of everyone. Why should she? So you haven't been able to trace everyone who was there at the time the Dixons were?
No, there are 2 caravans in particular that we can't trace the occupants of. Number 45, which was occupied by 4 adults and a child, and a red car and a touring caravan, which was occupied by 2 fair-haired males with short hair who were extremely fit and could have been from the army.
And if anyone had tents there as well and hasn't yet contacted the police or been contacted by you, you want to hear from them as well?
Yes,
presumably.
indeed, yes.
Now, tell us about this. I know these are replicas of what's missing from Mr. Dixon.
Yes, Mr. Dixon's brown fold-over wallet was stolen, similar to this. It contained 7 credit cards, a telephone charge card and his driving licence. These make up an unusual array of credit cards, and some of them, particularly the Trust House 40 Gold card, is not something that a large number of people would carry.
Okay. Well, as I say, it might be quite difficult to remember what you were doing on the 29th of June, but you'll know if you were on holiday in this area, and if you were on that coastal path in particular, or if you were at that campsite around that time, please contact us. If you think there's anything that you can add in any way, here's the number, 01 811 8055. Mr. Jones and his team are here. If you prefer, you can ask to speak to a BBC researcher. Other members of the team are standing by at the incident room in Carmarthen, and the number there is 0267 235 101. That's 0267, the code for Carmarthen, 235 101.